Zelda Fight stood perfectly still as Quinla Brexworth hovered over her keyboard, sneering at the 53-page audit Zelda had poured a year of her life into. "This is garbage," Quinla announced coldly. Then, with one click, she deleted it in front of the entire department. 23 co-workers sat in silence. No one defended her. Quinla waited, smug, expecting Zelda to cry, to beg, to shrink. But Zelda's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then turned and walked out of the room. It was Marlowe Partners with an offer, $500,000 a year, full autonomy, and a team that actually respected what she'd built. Quinla had no idea she'd just erased the very woman keeping the company alive. Zelda wasn't broken. She was done playing small. And her revenge, it wouldn't be loud. It would be precise, permanent, and poetic. This is what happens when quiet power finally speaks. 18 months before that explosive conference room moment, Zelda Fight walked into the glass-walled offices of Petone Analytics for the first time. She had just been hired as a client relationship coordinator, a role that sounded, frankly, dull. Her job description was all about maintaining communication logs, scheduling follow-ups, and tracking most people skimmed past in job listings. But Zelda needed a stable role, and the title sounded professional enough, so she took it. Her first week was a blur of onboarding documents, system walkthroughs, and short introductions. But what caught her attention wasn't the complexity of the software, it was the silence in the client notes. File after file read like robotic exchanges. Delivered on 4/7, confirmed payment on 4/10. No further questions. There were no human details, no signs of relationship building. Zelda found out quickly why. Her supervisor, Quinla Brexworth, made it clear on day one that she didn't believe in emotional bandwidth. "Clients want results, not stories," she told Zelda during their first review. "This isn't therapy, it's business." Quinla saw Zelda's role as overhead unnecessary labor that could eventually be replaced by automated systems. Efficiency was her gospel. But Zelda wasn't built that way. She believed people remembered how you made them feel. So, quietly, without permission or fanfare, she started adding warmth to every interaction. When Vernon Hutchcraft mentioned his dog's hip problems during a brief check-in, Zelda wrote it down. 2 weeks later, she followed up when Constance Farweather's textile company hit its 15-year anniversary. Zelda didn't just log. These were small touches. A 45-second comment here, a 2-minute follow-up there. But something started happening. Clients opened up, conversations grew richer, and over time, those connections transformed into loyalty. Vernon ended up purchasing expanded services. Constant booked a $12,000 0-cents consultation that hadn't even been discussed before. But while Zelda was planting seeds of connection, Quinla was tracking call duration. During monthly reviews, she would tap her pen impatiently as she flipped through Zelda's reports. "Why are your calls nearly triple the average length?" she asked one day, not even trying to hide her irritation. "Efficiency is down. Automation exists for a reason." Zelda explained that her approach was intentional, that relationship building, though slower, led to repeat business and referrals. But Quinla didn't want explanations. She wanted numbers. Fast, clean, and impersonal. Still, Zelda kept going. She documented every interaction. She built detailed records, not just to satisfy company policy, but to capture the human texture of each client. Who had a kid heading to college? Who was getting married? Who had just lost a parent? These weren't distractions. They were data points of trust. Soon, clients began bypassing Peyton's general inboxes and phone lines. They reached out to Zelda directly. Roderick Yates, a bookstore chain owner, preferred to call her Cell. Tempest Living Well, one of their biggest catering clients, sent her handwritten thank you cards. Zelda wasn't flashy. She didn't make noise about what she was doing. She just quietly built bridges, one relationship at a time. And while Quinla obsessed over efficiency metrics, Zelda's work was quietly holding the company together. But no one noticed. Not yet. Because under the surface, a storm was brewing. Quinla's disdain wasn't fading, it was festering. and when a public spotlight forced her to acknowledge what Zelda had built, she wouldn't celebrate it. She would try to erase it. The email came late Tuesday afternoon. Zelda was summoned to the executive conference room the next morning to present her full-year audit of client interactions. She had spent weeks compiling 53 pages of carefully categorized data, personal notes, insights on communication trends, client retention patterns, and recommendations. It wasn't just a report. It was the beating heart of everything she'd built. She arrived early, dressed in a navy blue blouse and slacks, with a flash drive in hand and her chest tight with nervous pride. She thought, maybe, just maybe, someone finally saw her work. But the moment she entered the conference room, her hope began to wilt. Quinla stood at the front, already projecting Zelda's report on the large screen. 23 employees from various departments were seated. Zelda noticed their confused expressions. No one had told her this would be a group review. Quinla didn't wait. She began scrolling through the document rapidly, speaking with a mocking tone. "Let's take a look at some of the brilliant strategy here," she said, using air quotes. "Note for Vernon Hutchcraft. Dog's hip surgery scheduled for next month. Send good luck message." "Really?" She paused for effect. "This is what we're doing with company time?" Zelda froze. Her throat tightened. The room was silent except for Quinla's voice, dripping with disdain. More examples followed. Constance Farweather's birthday party, handwritten card, family recipe? Are we running a social club or a business? Zelda tried to speak, but Quinla cut her off. "This isn't professional. It's a liability. If this document were ever audited externally, we'd be laughed at. Or worse, sued for data overreach." Zelda's heart pounded. Her face burned. She glanced around the room, searching for anyone who might speak up. No one did. A few avoided eye contact. Others just stared at the screen. Then came the final blow. Quinla closed the report and turned to the group. "We don't need to waste time on fluff like this. Client relationships are based on performance, not personal trivia." She opened the shared server where Zelda's document was stored. Hovered her finger over the delete icon. "I don't want this kind of inefficiency poisoning our systems. This," she said, her voice rising, "is garbage." She clicked. Zelda's report vanished. Just like that, a year of work was erased with one smug motion. Her jaw tightened. She felt tears stinging the corners of her eyes but refused to let them fall. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A name flashed across the screen. Marlowe Partners. She stood up, slow and steady, and walked to the door without a word. The room remained silent as the door closed behind her. She answered the call, voice calm. They were ready to make an offer. That moment of public humiliation didn't end her story. It started the next, far more powerful chapter. The voice on the other end of the line was calm, confident, and clear. "Zelda, this is Ava Morton from Marlowe Partners. I think you know who we are." Zelda stepped into an empty hallway and nodded slowly, her voice measured. "I know," Ava continued. "We've been watching your work, your retention rates, the client growth. We know it wasn't..." Zelda felt her breath steady. For the first time in days, someone saw her. Not as overhead, not as inefficient, but as essential. Ava laid out the offer. $500,000 a year, profit-sharing equity, total autonomy over client strategy, no scripts, no timed calls, just full trust. "We want you to help us build something better," Ava said. "We saw what happened in that meeting. You deserve more." Zelda didn't hesitate. "I accept." 10 minutes later, she walked back into the meeting room. Quinla was still reviewing efficiency benchmarks, as if nothing had happened. Zelda raised her hand. "I resign." Silence, then confusion. Quinla blinked. "That's not protocol. You need to file..." I've already filed, Zelda interrupted. Documented hostile work environment. Immediate exit is allowed per HR Code 4.3. Gideon Ashworth, the CEO, looked up from his tablet and said nothing. Just nodded once. Slowly. Zelda packed her things. No one stopped her. No one even said goodbye. She walked out of Paton's headquarters, her back straight, her silence louder than any exit speech. Within 48 hours, she stepped into her new office at Marlowe Partners. It was smaller. No glass walls, no automated dashboards. Just her, a laptop, and a short list of clients, ready to be treated like people, not revenue. She crafted her first email not from a script, but from memory. Hi Constance, how did your daughter's swim meet go? She didn't ask for business. She just connected. She wasn't trying to recruit. She wasn't trying to retaliate. But something powerful started happening. The clients began to follow. The first call came 3 days after Zelda settled into her new office at Marlowe Partners. It was Vernon Hutchcraft. His voice was warm, but direct. I heard what happened, he said. Peton's emails feel cold now. No follow-up, no energy. You remembered my dog's surgery. Quinla asked about Q2 projections. I want to move my account. Zelda thanked him sincerely, but reminded him she hadn't solicited anyone. You're always welcome here, she said. But this has to be your decision. The next day, Constance Farweather called Zelda. I don't want to deal with a system that doesn't even acknowledge my company's birthday. You made us feel seen. I'd rather build with someone who understands people. Then came Brick Yamada, the logistics partner from St. Louis. That Quinla woman sent a 13-word message about changing service tiers. 14 words. You sent a 3-paragraph check-in when my daughter was sick. You're the reason I stayed as long as I did. Where do I sign? And just like that, it began. One by one, the clients started transferring accounts, terminating contracts, and quietly migrating over to Marlowe. Zelda never asked. She never hinted. They came because they wanted to, because they trusted her. Inside Peton, the panic began. Quinla scrambled. She tried to replicate Zelda's tone in emails, using awkward phrases like, hope you're doing well, and thinking of your big day, but it fell flat. Clients could sense the difference. With Zelda, warmth came naturally. With Quinla, it was copy-pasted. Mutual industry contacts started reaching out. One messaged Zelda privately. Your old office is in chaos. Quinla's blaming you. Gideon's furious. No one knows how to fix it. Zelda responded with a simple, thank you for the update. She felt no need to correct the record. The truth was self-evident. Peton had never valued real relationships. They wanted control. But loyalty can't be programmed. At night, Zelda would reread the thank you notes she'd saved over the years. The one from Tempest living well, the handwritten card from Brick's daughter, the photo Vernon once sent of his dog recovering after surgery. These weren't data points. They were proof. Proof that her way, slow, she said, he was powerful. She thought back to the moment Quinla deleted her audit, called it garbage, mocked her for caring, and yet, that very care had kept the company alive. Zelda didn't gloat. She didn't post on social media. She didn't send any messages back to Peton. Her strength wasn't in revenge. It was in knowing, without a doubt, that she had been right all along. Clients weren't looking for perfection. They were looking to be remembered. And now, Zelda had the freedom to keep doing what she did best, without shame, without limits, and without anyone trying to silence her voice. By the end of Zelda's third week at Marlowe Partners, over 60% of Peton Analytics' top-tier clients had moved their accounts over. Not through pressure, not through persuasion, just through word of mouth and loyalty. Vernon, Constance, Brick, Tempest living well. The list kept growing. They were following Zelda, before anyone else bothered to care. At first, Piton tried to downplay the losses. Quinlaw issued internal memos calling it a temporary shift and urged remaining staff to tighten communication protocols. But the reality was bleeding through the walls. Entire teams sat idle. Revenue dropped. One by one, account managers were quietly let go. Panic set in. The board demanded explanations. Reports were pulled. Patterns emerged. Every lost client had been part of Zelda's original portfolio. Every complaint centered on cold, robotic communication and Quinlaw's dismissiveness. The one woman who had mocked Zelda's chit-chat now found herself floundering in its absence. Quinlaw tried to spin it. She claimed Zelda had breached her contract, implied that she'd taken confidential data, even suggested a legal review. But there was no proof, because there was no foul play. Zelda had done nothing but walk away. The clients followed by choice. Then came the message Zelda never expected. It was from Gideon Ashworth. He asked for a meeting, said he wanted to talk partnership. When they met at a quiet downtown cafe, he didn't waste time. "We're considering an acquisition of Piton's remaining client list," he said. "But frankly, that list is shrinking by the hour. I think you and I both know why." Zelda sipped her coffee, said nothing. Gideon leaned in. "I'm prepared to offer you a leadership position, Director of Client Relations, full autonomy, double what we paid you before. The team would report to you. You'd run the department your way." Zelda smiled, calm, poised, unshaken. "You only value me now because your house is on fire," she said. Gideon sat back, his expression unreadable. "I needed one person," she continued, "just one, to stand up in that room when she deleted my work. No one did. Now you want to rebuild your company on my back. No, thank you." She stood, nodded politely, and walked away. At Marlowe, things were very different. The culture wasn't perfect, but it was sincere. Zelda's numbers exceeded every projection. She was promoted to senior partner by month 5. Her client strategy became the foundation of the firm's new onboarding system. She trained new hires, mentored junior staff, and built a reputation not just for retention, but for revolutionizing how client relationships were measured. She received thank you gifts, invitations to speak at conferences, even a feature in a major business magazine under the headline, "The Human Touch That's Reshaping Analytics." And Piton? The spiral was irreversible. Quinlaw was removed by the board in a 6-1 vote. Her LinkedIn profile went silent. No new jobs, no statements, just a digital void. Zelda never gloated, never posted a cryptic quote. She didn't need to. She hadn't set out to destroy Quinlaw. Quinlaw had done that all by herself. 6 months later, Zelda Fight sat in a glass-walled conference room, listening as a young consultant finished presenting her first client engagement report. The room was full of fresh energy, new hires, junior associates, and curious department heads. Zelda had built this, not with spreadsheets or cold emails, but with intention, trust, and empathy. She now oversaw 3 full client engagement teams at Marlowe Partners. Each team followed a relationship fee model that Zelda designed from the ground up. There were no rigid scripts, no countdown clocks for calls. Every interaction was measured not just in output, but in outcome. Did the client feel heard? Was the relationship stronger after the call? That was the metric that mattered. Zelda didn't keep her method to herself. She trained every new hire personally, not just in tools, but in presence. How to remember a client's daughter's graduation, how to follow up after a loss, how to recognize the moment when business becomes human. The results spoke louder than any revenge ever could. Client churn troughed by over 40%. Referral business doubled. Handwritten thank you notes started arriving, not to the firm, but to Zelda herself. One from Brick Yamada said, "You reminded me why it mattered." Her colleagues now looked to her, not just as a team lead, but as a visionary. When discussions came up about company culture, it was Zelda they asked to draft the language. When Marlowe prepared to pitch to a major healthcare client, it was Zelda they sent to open the conversation. She had become, in every sense, the leader Quinla never saw in her. When news quietly broke that Peyton Analytics had merged with a mid-tier firm in Chicago, Zelda took a deep breath. She read the announcement, noted the bullet point that listed leadership restructuring, and understood what it meant. Quinla Brexworth was not retained. There were no fireworks, no cheers, just quiet validation. Zelda didn't feel smug. She didn't share the article. She didn't even tell her team. Instead, she closed her laptop, walked to her office window, and watched the afternoon light settle over the skyline. Because her victory had already happened. It happened every time a client smiled when she remembered their name. Every time a consultant said, "I handled it the way you taught me." Every time a former Peyton client sent her a message saying, "You were the reason we stayed so long." Zelda's power wasn't built on Quinla's downfall. It was built on something far more lasting. Proof that kindness scales. That listening matters. That in an industry obsessed with numbers, the most valuable currency is connection. She didn't have to destroy anything to win. She evolved. And in doing so, she proved that leadership isn't about control. It's about care. It always was. 2 years later, Zelda Fight stood beneath the bright lights of a tech summit stage, the words "human-centered growth" projected behind her in bold letters. Rows of executives, consultants, and analysts leaned forward, pens in hand, as she spoke not about conversion rates or automation, but about trust. She told them that connection builds longevity, that empathy fuels retention, and that real success starts with remembering who people are, not just what they pay. She shared stories of clients who had stayed with her through 3 firm changes, of junior consultants who went from overwhelmed to extraordinary because someone took the time to listen. Her voice was calm, steady, and strong, and when the session ended, the applause echoed louder than any boardroom meeting she'd ever sat through at Peyton Analytics. Now cited in industry case studies, Zelda's client-first model had reshaped the conversation across the analytics world. Firms that once prioritized speed and volume were shifting. Listening had become strategy, and in countless conversations behind closed doors, her name came up as the gold standard. Peyton Analytics, it barely made headlines anymore. What was left had been folded into a larger corporate entity stripped of its identity. Quinla's name hadn't surfaced in months. Her online profiles remained untouched. Her voice, once so loud in Zelda's world, had vanished into silence. And Zelda? She didn't feel anger when she remembered that awful meeting. She didn't revisit the sting of being called inefficient or see that deleted file as a loss. She saw it as the hinge point, the moment everything pivoted. Because without that humiliation, she might have stayed. She might have continued to shrink herself, to make room for a system that never truly saw her. That one moment of dismissal had lit a fire, not of revenge, but of purpose. She often thought about that, how a single act of disregard had pushed her into clarity. Every client she helped today, every junior team member she mentored, every keynote she gave, all of it flowed from that moment. That room. That deletion. That insult. Her power didn't come from tearing anyone down. It came from rising on her own terms. As she stepped off stage, a young consultant approached her and said, "You're the reason I stayed in this industry." Zelda smiled. That was the real legacy. Not revenge, not rivalry, but impact. Quinla's story was over. Zelda's had only just begun. Have you ever had your work dismissed as worthless? been told that empathy has no place in your job, that the extra mile you walk, the annual data note, the thoughtful check-in, the moment you actually listen, is a waste of time. Zelda Fight's story is a reminder that care is not inefficiency. It's the foundation of impact. When her boss deleted a year's worth of effort in front of the entire department, she didn't beg. She walked out and let her legacy walk in behind her. Her quiet revenge wasn't a campaign. It was proof. Proof that human connection can scale. That real loyalty isn't bought, it's earned. And that no one gets to define your worth but you. So, here's the question. Have you ever been underestimated, dismissed, laughed at only to prove them wrong by becoming everything they said you couldn't be? Tell us your story in the comments below. And if Zelda's rise gave you chills, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories of redemption, bold comebacks, and women reclaiming power with precision. You don't have to scream to be heard. You don't need to throw punches to make a point. Sometimes, the most powerful response is walking out, quietly, and building an empire right where they told you not to bother.